Hi, everybody. This is Michael James with the Noggin Podcast. And today we have a very special guest with us, David George Brooke, that gratitude guy. David and I met out of Seattle maybe 8.5, 9 years ago now. Is that kind of close, David?
Say pretty close. Yep.
Awesome. And so I'd like to introduce David to the Noggin Podcast. The Noggin Podcast is about bringing your ideas into the world and how you execute on them. So in the first few episodes, I talked about a variety of different ideas, what I'm up to in life, the new business ventures that we're involved in, as well as feature guests that we're going to be bringing in. Today, we actually have a guest, David George Brooke, and I'd like to introduce him and let him kind of tell the story of how initially him and I got introduced and kind of how that organic story led into, and I'll kind of let him tell that initial story. So David, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business and how you and I initially met?
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I would say, as you mentioned, it was probably about 8 or 10 years ago. And I remember I was doing a talk at the Linwood Convention Center, I believe it was. And they had, as many times when you do talks, they have breakout sessions and different things. And so people are doing different subjects. You can go around to the different rooms, breakout rooms, and you can see the title of what the topic is. And I'm pretty certain, if memory serves correct, that yours was on constant contact and email marketing, if I'm not mistaken. And so I stepped in there and listened to it, and I thought, what's this young guy doing? He really seems to know what he's talking about, and just a dynamic speaker and covering it and going through all the different aspects of email marketing and so forth. And my subject, which I'll get to in a second, is gratitude. But so I met him afterwards and we kind of talked. And, one of the things I've really noticed that I've enjoyed, I've been doing this for about 10 years now, is when you get into an area or community of people that want to make a difference, you hear that a lot, impact lives and provide a service and really help people, is you get something that I have not come up with a better word for it. It's just, there's a like-mindedness about it. And I met you, and even though you're half my age, it didn't really matter. We just had an instant connection. In fact, I keep joking that I'm going to get the adoption papers and adopt you officially to be my son. So I have 3 sons instead of 2. But we just hit it off immediately, and then started kind of getting together for coffee. And then I live in Seattle and you've been living in Bellingham. And so we were relatively close by. But I think what really probably propelled us forward the most was just that, again, that like-mindedness, that single-mindedness about wanting to do things and really under the auspices of helping people. And my brand has been, for the last 10 years, since I got into speaking and kind of left the retail world, has been that gratitude guy. And it's all about helping people to focus on what they have versus what they don't have. And one of my mantras is gratitude turns what you have into enough. And it's so important to have an attitude of gratitude, or a mindset that has gratitude as part of the glass half full type of philosophy. And so I started speaking, or I was speaking at that time too, have continued speaking, and I do coaching, and I've done books and gratitude journals and online courses and group coaching and one-on-one coaching. I do a lot of coaching, both again in the group setting as well as one-on-one, and it's all under the auspices and the headline of being grateful for what you have, and how it's your life. It can be your relationships, it can be money, it can be your career, it can be family, friends, whatever. And the whole sort of speaking, coaching, books all kind of go together. And then along the way too, Michael, you and I have collaborated on things with a lot of, for lack of a better term, the back end things. I know the front end of computers and things relatively well, but you're a whiz at the back end and all the things, whether it's the email marketing you talked about at that one point, websites, communication, social media, of course, is huge, and all those things. And I've gotten to know some of those things pretty well, but I've really turned to you for a lot of the really more in-depth variety of that, or in-depth knowledge, to really make those platforms work for you. And in this world today, where all that electronic aspect of things is so important. So again, I just think the one word, I think, or words that come to mind more than anything else, is just this incredible like-mindedness. And you've always, one of the things I've said too for many times, and I have a podcast of my own, and it's when you meet people, you instantly either like them, or it's not that you don't like them, it's just that you just have that same connection. And you and I had that connection from the beginning. And so much of it is wanting to make a difference. And regardless of our situation, what our family was like, what our education was like, what growing up was like, just knowing we're on this planet, and I guess my age too, it's a very short amount of time. I've been on the planet over 7 decades. It seems like about 10 or 20 years. It goes by so fast. We both wanted to accomplish a lot. And so just doing that in tandem and being together and just having that energy, and that it's like the best compliment I can give you for you and me is like this tremendous tennis match. It just goes back and forth, and the ball, these long rallies or volleys or whatever they call them, and never a dull moment, you know. And I can think of driving up to Bellingham. I haven't been there for a while because of COVID and so forth, but going to Starbucks and things, and you and I getting together and going over all the initiatives we were working on, 2 or 3 hour meeting. It's time to go, and it feels like I've been there a half hour. So it's just been a tremendous relationship, and I very much appreciate you and what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to bring you onto this podcast and like give you an extra level of exposure and see, new audiences, new eyes. Since those 9.5 years we've known each other, the thing that impresses me, David, is you are twice my age. You do have this phenomenal work ethic. You have these ideas and you're making them a reality. You're making it a business, an ongoing service, and you're changing lives in that process. Yeah. Which, again, huge gratitude to you, sir, for doing so. Thank you. For you to be able to work with anyone's age, understand your son's, how old is your youngest son?
27, and my older son is 37. Yeah.
So, David, he's come up with a very unique life. You've had lots of girlfriends, you've been married, and, you've had all these life stories that have, calculated to your presentation and how you're able to reach and reciprocate with other people. Right. And when I've seen you speak in person, you touch people extremely deeply, intimately, and their emotions, you're able to connect with a very wide audience. And the message you have, can be, listened to or taken in by just about anyone. And now you've made the audios, the podcasts, and the books. And, it's been fun to really watch how that content and those channels have been created and grown over time. Yeah. And I'd say you're a pretty big authority in those spaces. So it's been really cool to watch. So.
Well, thank you. And I think you mentioned been married a few times and girlfriends and just different things. I really realized really early on in the speaking business that one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful mode or aspect of speaking is the stories you tell. So when you've been on the planet for a long time, there's tremendous stories that you have that you own, that you've lived yourself, and they illustrate points that you're making during the talk. And I think what's neat about it is that the audience member is looking at you thinking, what does this person do? And I've said sometimes, I'm not teaching out of some book, and I point to my shoes. These shoes have walked down these paths and they've seen it. And so one of the most common themes that I seem to find over and over again is people bouncing back from traumas and tragedies and setbacks in their life. And we live, unfortunately, in a world where so much of this drug culture we have, where we're really all drinking drugs, alcohol, all that stuff is just somebody's coping mechanism. That's just how they're trying to get through. And unfortunately, I lost my wife, the mother of my children, to an overdose on prescription medication. And she died on September 29th, 1998. And there again, it was getting hooked on something that was a way to just try to cope with the stresses of life. So I get to provide this gratitude mindset is a very, very healthy coping mechanism in a world of so many destructive and deadly ones that are killing people on a regular basis. And it's neat because where you and I fit in so well together, and I've seen you speak as well, is anything where you get to reach a bigger audience. And so again, whether it was way back to constant contact and email marketing or social media or all these new platforms, I don't think back then they had Instagram and TikTok. There might've been Facebook and YouTube and things like this.
We were talking about it, but it hadn't shown up yet.
It hadn't shown up.
Like, get ready, buddy.
That's right. It's right. It's going to happen. And all those things do is help you reach a bigger audience. And I think when I feel very blessed to know on a regular basis, whether it's an email, I have a notebook a few feet from me that I call it my heartwarming emails and notes notebook. And it's stuffed with notes. You changed my life. You saved my life. You do all these different things. And it just makes me feel so validated and that what I'm doing has a purpose. And so when you really understand that and that you have a message that you want to get to more people, the more you get to people, the more you have people you're saving and more people you're helping. So that's why again, I come back to you always as my social media expert, among many other things too, websites, anything to do with so much of the electronic world we're in today is all about reaching more people. Because if you really are fond of something, you really feel good about it, it's just natural to want to reach more people. And you've been a great influence on me in that regard.
Thank you. It's finding those people that I, energetically connect with over the years, and it's finding ways to extend their messaging, their branding, their services, and their classes and courses out to as many people as possible that resonate within, those constructs. And, working with you and other people in those spaces, you really get to learn all. There's 300 plus million people here in the States, and there's 7 billion plus people in the world. And so to really try and understand the size of that, it's endless. You can work with a lot of people. So can all of these other folks doing similar types of services or products.
Well, and it was interesting. You said, you said something earlier about, I think maybe before we were on the air, about follow through and the work and so forth. And I've always liked the line about it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple to you just have to do this. But you and I talked about an individual that you introduced me to, a young lady that I just met, and you suggested, David, I think you should talk to her. And you met her through your efforts. And then I talked to her, clicked with her immediately. And so you've got to follow through, and you've got to reach out, and you've got to make those efforts and really be consistent in your message and with your follow through, as I say, and get back and do things. But gosh, it's so neat because it reminds me when it's interesting. You started out the podcast with how you and I met, because it was just an instant connection we had. And with this young lady we just mentioned, same thing. And it's so important. In fact, speaking of stories, and I was taught by many a speaker about, I have a story for every single, situation you can come up with that illustrates a point. And I remember a good buddy of mine a number of years complaining about his friend, because his friend would sit there in his condo with the television clicker, and he'd click changing channels, go, how come I can never meet any women as he's changing channels? And the friend says, you may have to get out of the condo. You may have to actually go places and go meet people. I don't know if it's a bar or somewhere, but that's what you've done. You've expanded your horizons. You don't just sit there with your clicker changing channels. You're out there making things happen, and always like the solid number and just different things. You're always uncovering new things, new modes, new platforms. And that's what it's all about. So it's great to have a message, and it's great to take it out there, but it takes effort and it takes energy, and it's not just going to happen by changing those channels of that clicker.
Well, as you remember me telling you about the social media platforms initially, it's going to be consistent, going to have to be creative, and it's going to take some time of yours.
Yeah.
But here's the potential. And you saw that, and you've been consistent. And now look at what you're doing. You're all over the country. Yeah. So David, now that you've been doing this 10 years, what's your next month look like for you? What are you up to? Where are you going?
Well, thanks for asking. A lot of it is more of the same, which is, again, the social media. For instance, I do a daily gratitude walk that every day that goes out, and it's got a message, and it's just a 1 minute message. And it goes out to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and so forth. And really, really important to have that consistent message. In this case, it's gratitude, but anybody who's got their platform or their message that they want to get out there. But for me, the most exciting thing that's coming up is, because of the last 18 months and COVID-19 and everything, is I'm now traveling again. And I'm still a little concerned, like a lot of people are. I just had, not to mention three things that all got postponed because of the variant and some things that have come back. So that's kind of concerned me a bit. But what I'm really excited to this next month is I'm going to be traveling Nebraska, Kansas City, Pensacola, Las Vegas, and all in the next 60 to 75 days. And I'm really excited to get back out in front of people, because Zoom, as we're recording this, and I do on my podcast, record it on Zoom and then put it out to YouTube, and then also put it on the radio network as well. There's just, you learned how to really give me a high five. How you doing, Michael? Good to see you. I like your chair. And you'll really make people feel they were part of something. And I think what's interesting is with all that's being said, and Zoom really helped a lot of us, to say the least, I'm so looking forward to getting back out in front of people and hearing the laughter. And I would say, when on Zoom, you generally mute most everybody. And so in the first, I think I've done like 110 Zoom calls, Zoom presentations since the pandemic, about March 15th of 2020. But in the beginning, I had to get so used to it, because when you have a live crowd, you'll say things and they'll laugh and they'll clap and all those things. And I'd say something that was funny, and you see, but you couldn't hear anything because everybody was muted. So I guess I'll go on to the next subject now. I guess I'm not going to wait for the applause to die down.
Knock that crowd out.
Yeah, exactly. So it took a different kind of a mode, but boy, I am going to be forever grateful, speaking of my favorite word, to Zoom, because it really saved me. And I went to some places. I have a USA map, and I have little blue arrows, all the places that I have, or red arrows, all the places I've traveled. But now I have a huge number of blue arrows, which is all the places I went via Zoom, and made it so easy. 3, 4, 5 hours ahead of time didn't matter. Here we are, and there's the Zoom, and they're right there. And here we are in Florida. Here we are in New Jersey. Here we are in Vermont. You know, it was really neat. So you open up a lot of things too, but it really is. And I think you're the same. It's just really about getting that message out to more and more people. And when you feel strongly about it, you just want to reach as many people as you can. So back to your original question, I'm just really excited because the traveling, and, you know, I'll be wearing my mask. I'll be at the airport tomorrow and everything, but I got books stacked up, and there's a lot of little things I do, experiential type exercises, where turn to your neighbor, take this 3x5 card, stand up, put your arm, do your arm in a circle to prove points, and then turn to this person, then read this off, and then write down these 3 things. So it's very exercise oriented, very experiential, but there's nothing like being in front of that crowd. So I'm really looking forward to having that. You know, it's just like when you and I met. Remember when you, when I came up to your seminar, you had a full house. I mean, it was packed, and it's really cool that way. A lot of energy.
It's very dynamic, and like watching you in the rooms and audiences, I've seen you in some really big audiences, and it's amazing how the entire room is like playing out of the palm of your hand. And you, again, it's the emotion and that energy of like 500 people or 500 soldiers or more, and you got them like listening of every single word and syllable that comes out of your mouth. So it's really impactful, I think, on a lot of lives. You know,
and
you know, they might take it home too and share with their friends,
that's what you really want, is
their wives and others.
What do they get tomorrow? Because I mean, to me, I've seen some tremendous speakers, but ask me the next day what they said yesterday, and I can't remember. So what you want to have something that they can take home. But it is interesting, because I'll tell people right up front, and I'll say there's going to be a lot of exercises. There's going to be some standing up, turning to your partners. So be ready. And they also, do we have your PowerPoint slides? No PowerPoint slides. This is just me and the audience. So we're going to do this, and I've got it all ready to go. And it's funny, because every once in a while people go, man, you talk fast. And I go, well, I said, I got a lot of energy, and I got a lot of things I want to get across. And I only got 60 minutes and so forth. And I said, plus, can you imagine if I went, hello, I'm that gratitude guy. I want to tell you some things today. I just don't think it would fly. It's just people, I get excited about it. And if one person, we've all heard this statement, but it's so true. I know it's true for you as well. Regardless of the size, if one person tells you, you impacted their life, you changed their life, it makes everything worth it. And if it's more than that, it's just like a huge bonus, because again, that's what you and I are really after, is impacting as many lives as we can. So
absolutely.
Really, really important point.
Now, with the impacting of lives, David, how could our audience, how could our listeners, how could future people understand more about the Gratitude Guy, what courses you offer, kind of some details of, like, say, I was to be a customer of yours, or, you know, I was to refer you. What would that look like for some people?
Well, let me thank you again.
In working with you.
You bet. Thank you again for asking that. And a lot of it revolves around my website, and that's thatgratitudeguy.com. And so there's a lot of information on there too. And one of the things you can find is that I'm a big, big proponent of a gratitude journal. And it takes 5 minutes every day to write your things that you're grateful for. The one that I have, it may not be able to come up as much on the because I've got another background here, but it's
Yeah.
Gratitude Guy's daily gratitude journal. It's available on Amazon, and it takes 5 minutes a day. But the thing that's neat about it is it's got a template. So you can follow it, and it has what's known as your daily number. It has your special events, and current events that are happening in that day, special occasions, I should say. There's some lines for what you're grateful for today. There's the 2 lines for the highlight of your day. There's a little inspirational gratitude type quote. And then on the right-hand side is your gratitude for tomorrow. So the gratitude journal is certainly one way, but as you've alluded to, Michael, a lot of this is we need kind of an injection. It really helps. We don't need it, but it helps to have an injection of something every day. It's the same reason why you would brush your teeth every day, take a shower, do some of these basic things that we do, because it's just a new day. And so gratitude's no different. So for me, I have the daily gratitude walk, which goes out to all these platforms, and almost all those platforms are available at David George Brooke or That Gratitude Guy. One or either of those, you'll find it in Instagram and TikTok and all those, but it's usually under That Gratitude Guy. On YouTube, you get all sorts of videos. I think 15 or 1600 subscribers, and I have over 1500 videos on YouTube now. And I think, Michael, you and I talked way back when I'm sure I told you, wouldn't it be cool? I started to do a video here and there, and I remember having coffee with you and going, someday I'm going to have 50 videos. Someday that's going to be quite the day. And now it's 1500. So, but that's,
now you're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that injection. And the reason why that's so important, and I learned so much of this from you, is because whether it's male or female or young or old or rich or poor, or whatever it might be, people have different ways of getting the content. So there's going to be people that want a Facebook post. There's going to be people that want to see something on TikTok, which is much younger and faster as Instagram is. The YouTube thing is great. The gratitude journal that you do there is great. And then another thing is that for people that are curious, because when I wrap up my talks, I always talk about how do you get more gratitude in your life. And coaching, as I mentioned, another thing I do, and that's again at thatgratitudeguy.com. And I have some assessments that you can take, but the most important thing is to email me and I will send you an assessment and we'll see if we might be a fit. And that's at david@thatgratitudeguy.com. But there's also something a lot of people like, and you mentioned consistency, Michael, which I 100% agree with. It's just like, an inch every day. And, or what's the example I always use? Michael James and David Brooke could walk a mile every single day together. And at the end of the year, we would have walked 365 miles. But we can't wait till December 1st and say, let's walk to Portland and back and call it good for the year, So you want those bite-sized pieces. And a good example is every Monday, I do these videos every day, the daily gratitude walk, but also I do the Monday morning minute. And that's a 1-minute video that comes out every Monday morning at 6 a.m. to my mailing list. And if you would like to get that, you simply go to your text and you text the number 22828. That's 5 digits, 22828 is the number. And in the message box, you type in Gratitude Guy and it'll ask you for your email and that'll automatically sign you up to the Monday Morning Minute. And that's really a lot of people like that. And that's, again, that monthly or that weekly, every Monday morning to get you going. And then the daily ones, you can get going to YouTube and subscribing. And that's under David George Brooke. So it's usually either David George Brooke or That Gratitude Guy. And there's other things on the website too. You have access to my podcast. My podcast is available on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. And it goes out every Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. And that is called That Gratitude Guy Podcast. You can also get it at thatgratitudeguypodcast.com. So the whole idea being, and then as I mentioned, the gratitude journals, you can get it at Amazon, you can get them on the website. If you go to the website, you get one and you get the second one half off, which is nice because there's a banner on the front. So really, it's just trying to give as many different avenues as possible for somebody to get connected with me, but more importantly, gratitude and knowing how much it can change your mindset. And just one of the things that we do when I mentioned the experiences and the exercises is I do a thing where I kind of say the daily number, and I have people put down their daily number, which is kind of taking their temperature, and then they write 4 or 5 things they're grateful for. And then I have them put down another daily number, and half the time, half the hands go up, the number's gone up. And just from a 60-second example of focusing on a half a dozen things you're grateful for, and your mindset can go up. And I tell them, if that can happen in 60 seconds, imagine what can happen in 5 minutes every day with a gratitude journal. So it's really, I think the biggest thing, Michael, that I try to get across is I implore people, give this a try. Here's the tools that I have. This is how it works. Take these tools, try them. And it's one of the healthiest coping mechanisms available, because again, at my stage on this planet, I've seen a lot of people that don't make it through tough times. And whether they're your age or my age, it doesn't matter. Everybody goes through these ups and downs. Like life is just this one big kind of roller coaster. The up high stuff is really cool, but what's going to define you or save you in many cases is when you're at the bottom, and how do you get out of there again? And I know your story extremely well, and you've had some significant ups and downs, even somebody in your 30s. And so how do you get through those? Well, having a gratitude mindset and being grateful and really focus on your blessings and your abundance is a great way to do it. It can really sustain you through some of the toughest times.
You bet. Now, you and I, over those 10 years, we have talked about a lot of different things: parents, grandparents, kids, relationships, what have you.
Yep.
Over the last 2 years since this pandemic, David, what have you noticed as far as like people around you, Facebook feeds, emails, just people in conversation? Do you notice that people are becoming more positive now coming out of this pandemic? Do you feel like people are in general like heavy and depressed, or do you feel like there's some positivity and this pandemic actually gave us some time to look inwards on ourselves and to reflect on what's good, what's bad, and maybe where we want to go in our lives? What do you think on that?
I think, good question. I think the reflection is always important. I certainly feel we're coming out of it, even though I mentioned a couple of my upcoming talks that got put sidelined again, postponed until the variant and some of these things wear down. But I think the worst of it was probably about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through the sort of the March 15th, 2020 to this summer, where after a year and a half, what it did for a lot of people, yes, there was some reflection. There was definitely some time to think inwardly, and you're in your house and so forth. But I think one of the biggest things that I saw come out of it, kind of a silver lining, is how incredibly important community is for people. And one of the big things I do a module called Find Yourself, Find Your Talent, Find Your Passion, Find Your Purpose. And I maintain that the most important relationship you'll ever have in your life is one you have with yourself. Number two, try to find what your talent is, personally or professionally, and then figure out what you're really passionate about. You marry those three things, you're probably going to get your purpose. But I think community is something that's so important, and people were starving for community. And yes, Zoom was a huge help. I can't imagine where we would have been without Zoom. But
can you imagine if there was no Facebook, no Zoom, no?
Oh my gosh. And just having
people are just watching TV all day. That would be interesting.
Exactly.
We're making phone calls, right? So.
And I know just having you and I have FaceTime sometimes on the phone, and just having that person's face right there, it feels like we're at that same Starbucks, and the phone's about 6 inches from my hand or what have you.
I feel like I'm closer to you than at Starbucks right now.
I know, isn't that interesting?
Like, isn't that weird? Like,
it is. It really is true. And so it really helped. But then you notice that over time, people got zoomed out, and I've had too many Zooms, and I'm getting this and that. And so and so I think that it really made people get kind of introspective and think about maybe one of the most important, significant things that came out of the 18 months is that importance for connection, and really understand how important community really was. And there was I heard something. We just passed the 20-year anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah,
such a difficult time for all of us to either go through or witness it or what have you. But there was an interesting fact that somebody mentioned in one of the broadcasts. They said that all the people, or a majority of the people that were either engaged or about to get married or living together or whatever they were, immediately after 9/11, they either got married or they broke up. And it was kind of like, we don't know about the future. We better move on this thing right now. So there was no more just hanging around. And I thought, man, that was interesting. I never thought about that, because a lot of us, as the world coming to an end, I mean, it was really a very challenging time, to say the least. But it forced people to kind of make a decision. So I think this pandemic kind of did a very similar thing where it really made us understand how important our connections are and our family and our friends, and Zoom helped it. But there's just nothing like, I actually shook hands with somebody the other day and it felt good after many, many months. Oh my God, I'm shaking hands again, or give kind of a bro hug, to a friend or what have you. And I thought, wow, that felt good. So maybe having a much higher appreciation level for those things that kind of got lost in the shuffle as a result of the pandemic. So made us think for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, it's, for me, it's been really interesting because of on the social sphere, like we're logged into so many different Facebook and Instagram and all these different profiles. And so you see like all these different feeds and comments and, the around the presidential election and, certain weather events, certain news events, certain memes that go out on social media. It's amazing how all this stuff, positive, negative kind of, translates to other things potentially. And a lot of people are following those threads, and it's, it can deter people. It can make people positive and have a different outlook on life. And, it seems like people in my space, at least, have been more positive. They've been trying to be creative, spend their time wisely, have as much fun as possible, work when they absolutely need to, and the rest of the time they're doing themselves. They're trying to figure out themselves. They're trying to live out their life the way they want. And I think that's kind of cool. So it's been for me, there was a heaviness to it, but I think it's transformed and transmuted to much more positive space. So
well, I agree. And I think something that's a very important concept for everything in life is the silver linings. There's always a silver lining. And there's some things like I recently did a video, and it was a blog post too. And that is it possible to be grateful when you're grieving? So even when you've lost somebody and it's grieving, and it can be, I lost my wife and I lost my mom and dad when I was relatively young. But yes, it is possible. There's still things to be thankful for. It doesn't mean that you're not going to take this time to grieve the loss of this person or this situation, but there's always going to be, and I'm looking out, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's still a beautiful day. And, it rains a lot in Seattle. So when it's a beautiful day, that's something to be very grateful for. So it's always,
those walks are a lot more enjoyable, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. And that's why I just think it's really important to know that there's always an upside to these things. And maybe one of the most important things of all, I didn't really mention, but I'll mention it here, I argue with people about this occasionally. It is a choice. You get to decide every day, Michael James, David Brooke, whoever it is, left side of the bed, right side of the bed, positive, negative, grateful, ungrateful, good, bad, and nobody makes you that way. So it's a choice that you get to have. It's free will. And so you can snap your fingers and stop being the negative Nelly, and you can be somebody who's positive and see how grateful you are for all these blessings and abundance you have, just like that. And you'll notice what a difference it makes to your mindset. It's so powerful.
Yep. Give yourself 60 seconds and see what comes out.
Exactly. That 60-second exercise is very good. That's very good. Yeah.
Start with that and see how the rest of your week turns into a grateful, state of mind. So
exactly. It's so true. So true.
Pretty amazing. And if you really stop and think, you should be more grateful than not about, there's so many things that are positive in your life compared to negative. So,
yeah. And I think sometimes one more thought on that is I think sometimes it doesn't take as much energy to be negative. I think it's easy to be negative. If you want to look at life, let's be realistic. We're all born and we all die. Nobody gets out of this thing alive. So inherently it's negative in the long run. Well, what happened to Michael James? What happened to David Brooke? I had a father who was very negative. I'd say, "Good morning, Dad." And he'd go, "What's good about it?" And I just thought he was just kind of baked that way. And so it's unfortunate, but it is that choice. And when you can look in that mirror and get a great relationship with that person and decide right now, you can snap your fingers, you can change that quickly and decide going forward, I'm going to put a positive spin on things. And your heart, your brain, your whole body's going to appreciate it so much more that you're running things that way.
If he's thinking that, he's feeling that, and then he's saying that.
That's correct.
Imagine if he changed up those things and the difference you would have taken it, as well as how he would have felt it and then hopefully lived it. So,
well, and especially in the case of him, there's 5 of us kids. And once you have children, there's another bunch of people in the equation. And you and I have talked about this, about my family and your family situation growing up and so forth. And if you don't want to have kids, that's fine. But once you have kids, you have an obligation to give them the best nurturing and upbringing that you can. And I think a lot of that should include a very positive view of things and really help them to make their way through the world when they start, pedaling their own bike. It's so important.
Absolutely.
So important. Yeah,
absolutely. It's, to get down that road, well, because there's so many roads nowadays, right? I mean,
absolutely.
As you know, with the phones and internet and all these options, having those parents that have the foresight to, respect you as a child and bring you up right and educate you properly and not be as negative and be in a more positive space. And, yes, my parents, your parents, like we've had some pretty interesting conversations. And
absolutely,
your dad saying that and my dad saying, go out and, be a C student or whatever, like,
right.
Me, I'm not trying to be a C student today. So.
Exactly. No, you're clearly an A+ student. And it's interesting, but even with that being said, if you used yours in my family situations, I will mention occasionally in talks about how, but don't make no mistake about it. I will be your training wheels, but I'm not going to pedal your bike. You got to do the work. I'll help you, but you got to do the work. I think the good Lord gives you a toolbox, but you have to build the house, so there's effort on our part, but the neat thing about it is you make that effort, it'll come back to you in spades, 10-fold, 100-fold. It's amazing how it comes back to you, just making that effort.
Well said. Thank you, David.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Well, David, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Noggin Podcast today. And
You're
that
welcome.
Gratitude Guy for showing up, telling us about your business, how you and I met initially, kind of what you're up to in life. And, we'd like to have you back at some point. And
I would love to come back. Always have time for Michael James.
I appreciate that. That'd be really great.
You bet.
Well, I know you've got a big event and some speaking upcoming, so I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
We really
so
appreciate
much.
your time, and hopefully our guests will reach out to you at some point and look you up for the Gratitude Journal, look you up for a class, or hopefully show up to a speaking engagement at some point.
Excellent. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
I will include all of your links, your website, all of the contact information, so anyone can reach out to you below in my details and comments. And we will be sending this podcast out to all of our channels and social media here very soon. So
sounds great. Thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming today as a guest. And we will be having future podcasts in the future. We have a few more podcasts upcoming this week. So make sure to watch YouTube, Facebook, and all the other channels that we're on. So everybody have a great day, and make sure to use your noggin if you ever get stumped and you can't figure it out. Cheers, everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks.